I'm Abigail Mishaw, though everyone calls me Abby. I'm 35 years old, and I never imagined my life would shatter during our annual family Christmas party. The festive lights were twinkling, holiday music playing softly when my sister Rebecca tapped her glass, calling for attention. With a cruel smile, she announced, "Now I'm the owner of that house. Get out." Our childhood home, where I'd been caring for our parents until they passed, was supposedly hers now. The room fell silent as 30 pairs of eyes turned toward me. Before I tell you how everything fell apart that night, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Hit that subscribe button if you've ever had family betray you too. To understand why Rebecca's announcement felt like a knife to my heart, I need to take you back to the beginning. Our parents, Elizabeth and James Mishaw, were the definition of the American dream. Mom taught second grade at Lincoln Elementary for 30 years, while Dad worked construction, eventually becoming a site supervisor. They weren't wealthy by any means, but they saved every extra penny for 15 years to buy our family home on Maple Street. That two-story colonial with the wraparound porch wasn't just a house, that was the physical embodiment of their love for us. Dad spent weekends fixing things up, building a treehouse in the backyard oak that became my sanctuary during teenage years. Mom transformed the backyard into a garden that neighbors would slow their cars to admire. Every corner held memories. Height marks penciled on the kitchen doorframe, the dent in the hallway wall from when Rebecca tried to move a bookshelf by herself, the creaky third step on the staircase that always gave me away when sneaking down for midnight snack. Rebecca and I couldn't have been more different, even though we shared parents and a childhood home. 3 years older than me at 38, Rebecca always had an edge of entitlement that sharpened as we grew. While I got my mother's compassionate nature and my father's patience, Rebecca inherited Mom's determination but paired it with a ruthlessness all her own. Growing up, Rebecca demanded the best of everything: the bigger bedroom, new clothes while I got hand-me-downs, and constant attention. When she got a B+ in algebra, our parents had to console her for days. When I won the state spelling championship in 7th grade, Rebecca conveniently knocked over the trophy the next day, claiming it was an accident. "You've always been too soft, Abby," she told me once when we were teenagers. "That's why you'll never get ahead in life." I didn't see it as softness. I saw it as valuing relationships over things, connection over competition. By the time we reached adulthood, our paths diverged dramatically. Rebecca moved to Boston for business school, then landed a high-powered corporate job at a financial consulting firm. She married and divorced Bradley, a fellow executive, within 2 years. No children, just an expensive condo and alimony payments in her favor. I pursued education like Mom, teaching art at the local high school while taking night classes to earn my master's degree. I dated Michael for 5 years, and we were talking about marriage when my world changed direction. It started with Mom forgetting things small at first, like where she put her glasses or what day it was. Then came the diagnosis: early onset Alzheimer's. Dad tried to handle everything himself, but his own health wasn't great. His heart condition required medication and stress management, something impossible when caring for someone with progressive dementia. When I got the call that Dad had collapsed from exhaustion, I made the decision without hesitation. I took a leave of absence from teaching, packed up my apartment, and moved back home. Michael supported my decision at first, driving the 40 minutes to visit on weekends. But as months stretched into a year with no end in sight, the relationship couldn't sustain the distance and stress. We parted as friends, but it was another loss in a growing collection. Rebecca's response to our parents' health crisis was characteristically practical. "We should look into assisted living facilities," she said during one of her rare visits. "I can contribute financially. That's the most sensible solution." But Dad was adamant. "Your mother and I worked our whole lives for this house. We want to stay here until the end." So I stayed too. I took a part-time teaching position at the local community college to keep some income flowing while becoming a full-time caregiver. Days blurred into nights of medication schedules, doctor appointments, and increasingly difficult personal care as Mom's condition deteriorated. Rebecca visited approximately once every 6 weeks, staying for precisely 2 hours each time, despite living just 45 minutes away. She always brought expensive prepared food that Mom couldn't eat due to swallowing difficulties and updated us on her latest promotion or luxury vacation. "I don't know how you do it," she'd say, looking around the house with a mixture of pity and something else, calculation, perhaps. "Living here again, giving everything up. I could never." What Rebecca didn't understand was that I wasn't giving up my life, I was choosing to be present for the people who had always been there for me. Yes, I sacrificed career advancement. Yes, my savings dwindled. Yes, I sometimes cried myself to sleep from exhaustion. But I never regretted my decision. Dad noticed, during quiet moments when Mom was napping, he placed his weathered hand on mine and simply say, "Thank you, Abby girl." Those 3 words carried the weight of everything he couldn't express: his gratitude, his sorrow at needing help, his recognition of my sacrifice, his love. Rebecca would call once a week, speaking to Dad for exactly 15 minutes, asking about his health in the same tone she might inquire about a business investment. When I mentioned that perhaps she could take a weekend to give me a short break, her response was swift. "That's why we offered to pay for professional help, Abby. You chose this arrangement. Besides, I have a major client meeting that weekend." There was always a major client meeting, or a business trip, or a networking event. Rebecca's career came first, second, and third in her list of priorities. Family ranked somewhere after her designer wardrobe and spa memberships. Despite everything, I still loved my sister. I understood that we processed grief and responsibility differently. I believed that somewhere beneath her ambitious exterior was the girl who once helped me build sandcastles at the beach and shared her ice cream when I dropped mine. I kept hoping that girl would reemerge, especially as our parents' health continued to decline. But as Mom's condition worsened and Dad's strength flagged, Rebecca's visits became even less frequent. Her calls shortened to quick check-in. Meanwhile, I learned to function on 4 hours of sleep, to lift someone twice my weight, to communicate with a woman who no longer recognized me as her daughter but still somehow trusted me completely. These were the hardest years of my life, but also the most meaningful. I learned the profound depth of family love through wiping my mother's face after meals, through reading my father's favorite Hemingway stories when his eyes grew too tired to focus on the pages, through holding both their hands as we watched the sunset from our porch swing. And through it all, the house stood strong around us, sheltering 3 people bound by blood and love and struggle. I came to know every creaking floorboard, every stubborn window that needed just the right touch to open. This wasn't just my parents' home anymore, it had become mine again too, in a deeper way than childhood had ever allowed me to appreciate. Mom passed away on a Tuesday morning in June. The summer light was streaming through her bedroom window, illuminating dust particles dancing in the air above her bed. I had just finished brushing her hair, something I did every morning, even though she no longer knew who I was. She looked at me with sudden clarity, squeezed my hand with surprising strength, and whispered, "Take care of him." Then she closed her eyes and simply stopped breathing. The funeral was a blur of black clothes and casseroles, of neighbors embracing me and relatives I barely recognized sharing stories about Mom. Rebecca arrived 10 minutes before the service in a sleek black designer dress that probably cost more than I made in 3 months. She delivered a polished eulogy that sounded suspiciously like something she might have downloaded and personalized. Afterward, I noticed her exchanging business cards with Dad's cousin who worked in investment banking. She was networking at Mom's funeral. I whispered in disbelief to Jennifer, our cousin who had been helping me with Dad when possible. "That's Rebecca for you," Jennifer replied with a sad shake of her head. "Always on brand." Dad seemed to age 10 years overnight after Mom died. The heart condition that had been relatively stable worsened rapidly. The doctor explained that this wasn't uncommon, broken heart syndrome had medical validity. I adjusted to new medication schedules, more frequent doctor visits, and the heavy silence that filled the house without Mom's presence. Rebecca called more regularly during this time, though her conversation with Dad often turned toward practical matters. "Have you updated your will since Mom passed?" I overheard her asking him one evening. "You should make sure everything's in order." Dad's response was too quiet for me to hear, but the conversation left him unsettled. Later that night, as I brought him his evening tea, he took my hand in both of his. "Abby girl, I want you to know something," he said, his voice raspier than it had been even a week before. "You've been the heart of this family. Without you, your mother and I would have lost so much time together. I'm going to make sure things are right." I shook my head, uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "Dad, please don't worry about any of that now. Just focus on getting stronger. Some things need to be said while there's still time to say them," he insisted. "I've watched you put your life on hold for us. That sacrifice shouldn't go." A coughing fit interrupted whatever he was trying to tell me. I never got to hear the end of that sentence. 2 days later, Dad had a massive heart attack while napping in his favorite recliner. The paramedics arrived quickly but couldn't revive him. Just like that, I became an orphan at 34. Rebecca flew in the next morning. This time, there were no tears at all, just efficiency as she helped me contact the funeral home and select arrangements. "We should start going through the house," she said the evening after Dad died. "There's probably a lot to sort through before we can decide what to do with it." "The house?" I asked, still numb with grief. "Rebecca, Dad isn't even buried yet. I'm just being practical, Abby. We both have decisions to make. You'll need to figure out where you're going to live, for one thing." Her words felt like ice water down my spine. "What do you mean?" Rebecca sighed as though explaining something to a child. "You moved back here to take care of Mom and Dad. They're gone now. Presumably, you'll want to restart your life." I stared at her, unable to form words. This house had been my home for the past 3 years. Before that, it had been our parents' home for nearly 30 years. The idea that I would simply pack up and leave immediately hadn't even occurred to me. "Let's just get through the funeral," I finally managed to say. Dad's service was smaller than Mom's had been. Many of their mutual friends had already paid their respects 3 months earlier. Rebecca wore the same black dress and delivered another polished speech. I could barely speak through my tears but managed to share a few stories about Dad teaching me to fish and build birdhouses. After the service, Mr. Wilson, a lawyer I'd never met before, approached us. "I'm handling your father's estate," he explained. "We'll need to schedule a reading of the will after the holidays." "Wilson?" I asked, confused. "Dad's lawyer was Michael Sullivan. They were friends for 20 years. Rebecca smoothly interjected. "Dad changed lawyers recently. He wanted someone with more estate experience. I recommended Gregory Wilson from my firm's network." This was the first I'd heard of any lawyer change. Dad hadn't mentioned it during any of our conversations, and we talked about practically everything. A twinge of unease settled in my stomach, but grief overwhelmed any capacity for suspicion. The next few weeks passed in a haze as I adjusted to the deafening silence of an empty house. Rebecca returned to Boston after extracting a promise that I wouldn't do anything with the house until after the holidays and the will reading. "We should make these decisions together," she insisted, though her tone implied she already had specific decisions in mind. I agreed, too exhausted to argue. Besides, I wasn't planning on making any major changes. I needed time to grieve, to figure out what came next. The house provided stability when everything else felt like shifting sand beneath my feet. As Christmas approached, an idea formed. Dad had always loved our family holiday gatherings. The more people, the merrier. The previous Christmas had been subdued due to Mom's condition, but he'd still insisted on putting up the tree and hanging lights outside. "Next year, we'll do it right again," he'd promised, though we both knew it was unlikely. I decided to honor his wish by hosting the traditional Michel family Christmas party one more time. When I called Rebecca to tell her my plan, I expected resistance. To my surprise, she thought it was an excellent idea. "Actually, I was going to suggest something similar," she said, her voice unusually upbeat. "It's a perfect opportunity for closure. And don't worry about anything, I'll come down a day early to help you." Her unexpected enthusiasm should have been my first warning that something wasn't right. Rebecca never volunteered to help unless there was something in it for her. But grief has a way of clouding judgment, and I was simply grateful not to face another argument. December arrived with a light dusting of snow that transformed our neighborhood into a holiday card scene. I threw myself into preparations for the Christmas party, finding comfort in following traditions that connected me to my parents. I pulled out Mom's handwritten recipe cards, yellowed with age but filled with the comfort foods that had defined our family gatherings for decades. Her famous spinach artichoke dip, Swedish meatballs, and the rum cake that took 3 days to prepare properly. I called aunts, uncles, cousins, and family friends, anyone who had been part of our holiday celebrations over the years. Almost everyone accepted the invitation, expressing appreciation for the chance to gather in James and Elizabeth's home one more time before whatever came next for the house. That phrase kept coming up in conversations, always carefully phrased. Whatever comes next for the house. It was clear everyone assumed changes were imminent but were too polite to ask directly what would happen after the will reading in January. I avoid thinking about it myself. The idea of leaving this home felt impossible. Every room contained memories I wasn't ready to part with: the kitchen where Mom taught me to bake, the living room where Dad and I watched old westerns, the backyard where we'd hosted summer barbecues and built snowmen in winter. The day before the party, Rebecca arrived as promised, rolling her designer suitcase into the house and surveying the decorations with an appraising eye. "You've been busy," she commented, running a finger along the mantel where I'd arranged Mom's collection of crystal snowflakes. "Looks nice." "Thanks," I replied, surprised by the compliment. I tried to make it feel like Mom and Dad were still here somehow. Something flickered across Rebecca's face, an emotion I couldn't quite identify. "Well, they're not," she said briskly. "But I suppose this is a good send-off." I chose to focus on the fact that she was here, supposedly to help, rather than analyzing her choice of words. "I've got most of the food prep done, but I could use help setting up the dining room if you don't mind." "Actually, I thought I'd organize Dad's office first," Rebecca said, already heading toward the stairs. "It's probably a mess, and people might want to look around." Her sudden interest in Dad's office struck me as odd. In all the times she'd visited during our parents' illnesses, she'd never once offered to help organize anything. But before I could question her, she'd disappeared upstairs. I continued my preparations, checking off items on Mom's meticulously detailed party planning list that I'd found in her recipe box. An hour later, I realized Rebecca was still upstairs. Curious, I headed to Dad's office and found her rifling through his filing cabinet, papers spread across his desk. "What are you looking for?" I asked from the doorway. Rebecca startled slightly but recovered quickly. "Just trying to get a sense of what needs to be dealt with after the holidays. Bills, accounts, that sort of thing." She gestured vaguely at the papers. "Also, I was looking for the Christmas ornament box. Aren't they usually stored in the office closet?" This was such an obvious lie that I almost laughed. The ornaments had always been stored in the attic, and Rebecca knew that perfectly well. We'd made countless childhood trips up and down those attic stairs carrying boxes of holiday decorations. "The ornaments are already out," I said slowly. "I decorated the tree 3 days ago." "Right, of course," she replied, hastily gathering the papers. "Well, I'm not finding much useful here anyway. I'll come help you downstairs." Throughout the evening, Rebecca's behavior grew increasingly strange. She insisted on answering the landline when it rang, intercepting calls from relatives confirming party details. She volunteered to run to the store for last-minute items but returned without half of what I'd requested, claiming they were out of stock. She made an unusual number of private phone calls, stepping outside to the porch despite the December chill. Most bizarrely, she became extraordinarily interested in the house itself, asking questions about recent repairs, property taxes, and whether I'd had the place appraised recently. "Why would I have the house appraised?" I asked, pausing in my preparation of Mom's traditional Christmas Eve lasagna. Rebecca shrugged, too casually. "Property values in this neighborhood have gone up. It's just good to know what assets are worth." "The house isn't an asset," I said quietly. "It's our home." Rebecca rolled her eyes. "Don't be sentimental, Abby. Everything has a value. Speaking of which, where did Mom keep her good jewelry?" "I haven't seen it in her bedroom." The abrupt change of subject gave me conversational whiplash. "I put it in the safe." "Why?" Just wondering, she said, inspecting her manicure. We'll need to divide those things eventually. That evening, as I was finishing the last of the party preparations, I overheard Rebecca on the phone in the guest room, her voice carrying through the old heating vent that had served as our childhood intercom system. It's practically mine already, she was saying to someone. The paperwork is ironclad. She doesn't suspect anything. A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the winter weather. Who was she talking to? What paperwork? What exactly wasn't I suspecting? When Rebecca emerged from the guest room, I confronted her in the hallway. Is there something going on that I should know about? For just a moment, genuine alarm crossed her face before she composed herself. What are you talking about? I heard you on the phone. Something about paperwork being ironclad. Rebecca laughed, but it sounded forced. Oh, that. Just some work stuff. End-of-year contract with a major client. She patted my shoulder condescendingly. Not everything is about you, Abby. But as she brushed past me toward the bathroom, she paused and added, you should enjoy this party, it might be your last one here. The comment lingered in the air between us like poison. Before I could respond, the doorbell rang, announcing the arrival of the first guests, and the moment to demand clarification slipped away. By 7 o'clock on Christmas Eve, the house was filled with the warmth and chaos of 30-plus people. Cousins caught up in the living room while Dad's brother Robert tended bar in the dining room. Mom's sisters Martha and Diane arranged cookies on platters in the kitchen, reminiscing about holidays past. The scent of mulled cider and pine needles mingled in the air, and for brief moments, I could almost pretend this was just another Michelle family Christmas, with Mom and Dad just around the corner. Jennifer found me refilling ice trays and gave me a quick side hug. You've done an amazing job, Abby. Your parents would be so proud. Thanks, I said, blinking back unexpected tears. It feels right, having everyone here. They're still with us somehow. They are, Jennifer assured me, helping arrange glasses on a tray. And whatever happens next with the house and everything, you know you've done right by them. No one could have done more. I was about to respond when the distinct sound of a knife tapping against crystal cut through the party chatter. The conversations quieted as everyone turned toward the living room, where Rebecca stood by the fireplace, champagne flute raised high. She looked immaculate in a red cocktail dress that probably cost more than my monthly income, her hair and makeup perfect. Next to her stood Mr. Wilson, the lawyer she'd introduced after Dad's funeral, looking uncomfortable in a suit that seemed too formal for a family gathering. If I could have everyone's attention, Rebecca called, her corporate presentation voice in full effect. First, I want to thank my sister Abby for organizing this lovely gathering. It's so wonderful to see all of you in our family home one last time. The phrase, one last time, caused a ripple of confused murmurs. I froze by the kitchen doorway, ashtray still in hand. As you all know, we lost both our beloved parents this year, Rebecca continued, her expression arranged in what I recognized as her sympathetic business face, the one she used when laying off employees. It's been a difficult time for all of us, especially Abby, who so generously put her life on hold to care for them. A few relatives nodded in my direction, but something in Rebecca's tone made me step further into the room, setting down the ice tray on a side table. The reason I've asked for your attention tonight is that I've received a special early Christmas gift that I wanted to share with all of you. Rebecca nodded to Mr. Wilson, who handed her a document from his briefcase. As you might not know, my father decided to make some changes to his estate plans in his final weeks. The room had gone completely silent now, all eyes darting between Rebecca and me. I felt a growing sense of dread, like watching an accident in slow motion but being powerless to stop it. Rebecca unfolded the document with a flourish. This is the deed to the Michelle family home transferred to me 3 weeks before Dad passed away. Her voice took on an edge of triumph as she looked directly at me. Now I'm the owner of that house. Get out. The words hung in the air like shards of glass. I heard Aunt Martha gasp. Uncle Robert muttered something that sounded like, "What the hell?" Jennifer stepped to my side, her hand finding mine in silent support. "Rebecca," I finally managed, my voice barely above a whisper, "what are you talking about?" My sister's smile tightened. "It's very simple, Abby. Dad signed the house over to me before he died. It's legally mine now, not part of the estate. And I'll be putting it on the market after the new year, so you'll need to find somewhere else to live. I'm giving you until January 15th. That should be plenty of time." The room erupted in shocked exclamations. Cousin James called out, "That can't be right. Uncle Jim would never do that to Abby." Rebecca's expression hardened. "I have the paperwork right here. It's all perfectly legal, signed and notarized." She held up the document. "Dad knew that Abby needed to restart her life, not stay trapped in this house forever. And frankly, after what she put them through, it's the least she deserves." "What I put them through?" I repeated, confusion momentarily overriding shock. "Oh please." Rebecca rolled her eyes dramatically, playing to her audience. "The martyr act is getting old. We all know you moved back here because your teaching career was going nowhere and your relationship failed. Mom and Dad were your meal ticket and your housing solution. You manipulated them when they were vulnerable." The accusation was so outrageous, so completely opposite to reality, that I couldn't immediately form words to respond. Silence apparently encouraged Rebecca to continue her character assassination. "Why do you think Dad transferred the house to me when he knew he was dying? He finally saw through your act. He knew I would make rational decisions about the property instead of clinging to it out of sentimentality or, worse, financial desperation." Uncle Robert stepped forward then, his face flushed with anger. "That's enough, Rebecca. Your father would never have cut Abby out like this. She gave up everything to care for your parents. With all due respect, Uncle Robert, you weren't here. You didn't see how she isolated them, controlled access to them, made them dependent on her. Classic caregiver manipulation." Rebecca gestured to Mr. Wilson. "Greg can confirm that Dad was of sound mind when he signed the transfer. He wanted this." The lawyer cleared his throat uncomfortably. "The document is legally binding." Mr. Mitchell understood what he was signing. Finding my voice at last, I addressed the lawyer directly. "When exactly did my father sign this? And why wasn't I informed about it?" Before Wilson could answer, Rebecca cut in. "It was a private decision, Abby. Dad knew how you'd react with emotional manipulation like you're trying right now. That's why he kept it quiet until after he was gone." "Jim would never have done this," Aunt Martha declared firmly. "Never. Not to Abby, who gave up everything to care for him and Elizabeth." "Well, he did." Rebecca's tone was dismissive. "And now I'm giving my sister notice. I'll need you out by January 15, Abby. You can take your personal belongings, but the furniture and household items stay there, part of the property value." The room had divided into stunned silence from distant relatives and vocal objections from those who knew our family intimately. I stood rooted to the spot, trying to process what was happening. The home where I'd spent my childhood, the home I'd returned to out of love, the home where I'd held both my parents' hands as they left this world. Rebecca was claiming it as her own and ordering me to leave. Uncle Robert attempted to defuse the situation. "This isn't the time or place for this discussion. It's Christmas Eve, for God's sake. Why don't we all take some time to cool down and discuss this privately after the holidays?" Rebecca smiled thinly. "I'm simply informing everyone of the new arrangements. Abby has 3 weeks to make alternative living arrangements. That's more than generous." She raised her champagne glass. "Now, shall we get back to celebrating? This is a party, after all." But the festive atmosphere had been irrevocably shattered. Relatives stood in uncomfortable clusters, whispering among themselves and casting concerned glances my way. The holiday music playing in the background now seemed jarringly inappropriate. I looked around the room at the home that had sheltered generations of Mishaw family memories: Christmas mornings, birthday celebrations, quiet Sunday afternoons, and final tender moments with my parents. The thought of Rebecca selling it to strangers, erasing our family's presence for profit, was physically painful. "You can't do this," I said, my voice stronger now, fueled by growing indignation. "Dad would never have given you the house knowing I'd be left with nowhere to go." Rebecca's expression hardened. "He already did. The deed is in my name. And frankly, your housing situation isn't my problem. You're a grown woman, Abby. Time to act like one instead of playing house in Mom and Dad's home." With those cutting words, she turned away, effectively dismissing me in my own home, or what I had thought was still my home. The public humiliation, combined with the shock of her announcement, left me trembling. Jennifer squeezed my hand. "Don't worry," she whispered. "Something's not right here. We'll figure this out." But as I looked at Rebecca chatting with Mr. Wilson by the fireplace, waving that document like a battle flag, I wondered if there was anything left to figure out. Had Dad really betrayed me in his final days? After everything we'd shared, everything I'd sacrificed, had he signed away my home to the sister who had barely been present? I couldn't believe it. I wouldn't believe it. But the evidence was literally in Rebecca's hands, and the smugness on her face suggested she held all the cards. The Christmas party that was meant to honor our parents' memory had instead become the stage for my public humiliation and apparent eviction. Silent tears slipped down my cheeks as I realized that in addition to being an orphan, I was now, apparently, about to be homeless as well. The party dissolved quickly after Rebecca's announcement. Guests made awkward excuses about early Christmas morning commitments or long drives home. Within 30 minutes, the house had emptied of all but a few close family members. Uncle Robert tried to speak with Rebecca privately, but she brushed him off, claiming she had an important call scheduled with international clients who didn't observe Christmas. "Always working, even during the holidays," she said with an artificial smile. "That's how you get ahead in life." Aunt Martha and Aunt Diane insisted on staying to help clean up, though I suspect they were more concerned about leaving me alone with Rebecca than about dirty dishes. Jennifer firmly announced she was spending the night, giving Rebecca a look that dared her to object. "It's fine," Rebecca said with a dismissive wave. "I'm leaving early anyway. Some of us have actual jobs to get back to." After she retreated to the guest room, my aunts embraced me in the kitchen. "This isn't right, Abby," Aunt Martha whispered fiercely. "Jim would never have done this to you. You know that, don't you?" I nodded, though doubt had begun to creep in. "But she has the deed." Mr. Wilson confirmed it. "That Wilson character gives me the creeps," Aunt Diane declared, aggressively wrapping leftover food in aluminum foil. "He's not the lawyer Jim used for 30 years. Something's fishy." Uncle Robert returned from making phone calls on the porch, his breath visible in the cold December air as he came through the door. "I've left messages for 3 different lawyer friends. It's Christmas Eve, so no one's answering, but someone will call back tomorrow. There has to be a way to challenge this." After my aunts and uncle finally left with promises to return the next day, Jennifer and I sat at the kitchen table with mugs of hot chocolate that neither of us was drinking. "What do I do now?" I asked, my voice small in the quiet house. "First, we find out if that deed transfer is even legitimate," Jennifer said firmly. "And I don't think it is. Uncle Jim was on serious medication those last few weeks. Plus, he told me himself how grateful he was that you were here." "When did he tell you that?" "When I visited 2 weeks before he died. He specifically said he was making sure Ab would be taken care of after he was gone." "That doesn't sound like someone planning to leave you homeless." A tiny spark of hope flickered to life. "We need to look through his papers." Rebecca was searching his office earlier. Maybe she was looking for something specific. We headed upstairs to Dad's office, a room I'd barely entered since his death. His presence was still so strong here. The leather chair with the worn armrests, the collection of paperweights on the windowsill, the family photos covering one wall. I ran my fingers over his desk, remembering how he used to sit here in the evenings, reading glasses perch on the end of his nose as he paid bills or wrote correspondence. "Let's start with the filing cabinet," Jennifer suggested. "What would we be looking for?" "I'm not sure," I admitted. "Maybe correspondence with his regular lawyer? Or notes about the house." We began methodically going through the drawers, careful to keep everything organized. In the second drawer, behind a folder of insurance documents, I found a worn leather journal I recognized immediately as Dad's personal diary. He'd kept one for as long as I could remember, jotting down everything from weather observations to reflections on life. "I didn't know he was still writing in this," I said softly, opening to the last entries. The handwriting in the final pages was shakier than his usual neat script, evidence of his weakening condition. I skimmed through entries about missing Mom, his frustration with growing physical limitations, and frequent mentions of gratitude for my presence. Then an entry from approximately 3 weeks before his death caught my eye. December 2, met with Michael Sullivan today while Abby was at the grocery store. Discussed final arrangements for the house. Sullivan will prepare the papers. Rebecca won't be happy, but after all Abby has done, it's the right decision. She deserves security after sacrificing so much for us. Jennifer, look at this, I said, pointing to the entry. He met with Michael Sullivan, his regular lawyer, about the house. Jennifer leaned over to read the entry. That's just 2 days before the date on Rebecca's deed. Flipping to the next page, I found another relevant entry. December 4, Rebecca stopped by unexpectedly today. Said Sullivan was incompetent, recommended her firm's lawyer instead, very insistent. Too tired to argue, agreed to meet with Gregory Wilson tomorrow. Don't like making changes at this stage, but Rebecca says it's important for tax purposes. My hands trembled as I turned to the final entry, dated December 5. Not sure what I signed today. Rebecca and Wilson came while I was having a bad day, double dose of medication for pain. Papers about the house. Rebecca said it was what we discussed. So tired. We'll ask Abby to look at copies tomorrow when thinking clearer. I looked up at Jennifer, tears blurring my vision. He never asked me to look at any papers. I never saw any copies, because there probably weren't any, Jennifer said grimly. Abby, this looks like Rebecca took advantage of your dad when he was heavily medicated. She brought in her own lawyer and had him sign something he didn't understand. The realization of what my sister had done hit me like a physical blow. She hadn't just tried to steal my home, she had manipulated our dying father in his final days, exploiting his weakened condition to get what she wanted. We need to find Michael Sullivan, I said, closing the journal carefully. Dad's real lawyer will know what was supposed to happen with the house. As we continued searching, Jennifer found a business card tucked into Dad's desk calendar. Michael Sullivan, attorney at law, with a handwritten appointment noted for December 2, mashing the journal entry. Let's call first thing tomorrow, Jennifer said, pocketing the card. We spent the next few days going through Dad's office methodically, looking for any other evidence. We found bank statements, insurance policies, and property tax records, but no copies of the deed transfer Rebecca had brandished at the party. What we did find, hidden in an envelope taped to the bottom of Dad's desk drawer, was a key to a safe deposit box at First National Bank, along with a note in Dad's handwriting, "For Abby, open after I'm gone." He left you something deliberately hidden, Jennifer observed. Something he didn't want Rebecca to find. Sleep was possible at night. I lay in my childhood bedroom listening to the old house creak and settle, wondering if these would be my final weeks within its walls. The thought of never again walking these halls, of strangers living in the rooms where my family had laughed and cried and loved, was unbearable. When dawn finally broke on Christmas morning, I made a decision. I wouldn't let Rebecca steal my home without a fight. Dad's journal entries suggested he had very different intentions than what Rebecca claimed. I needed to discover the truth. I tiptoed downstairs to find Rebecca already in the kitchen, suitcase by the door, typing rapidly on her laptop. Leaving already? I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral despite the anger simmering inside me. Early flight, she replied without looking up. I've emailed you a formal notice to vacate, just so everything's properly documented. My lawyer will be in touch about scheduling a walkthrough before you leave. I found Dad's journal, I said quietly. I know what you did, Rebecca. Her fingers paused over the keyboard for just a moment, a slight tell that confirmed my suspicions before resuming their typing. I don't know what you're talking about. He wrote about meeting with Michael Sullivan to arrange something for the house. Then suddenly you showed up with a different lawyer while Dad was heavily medicated. Rebecca finally looked up, her expression cold. Dad was perfectly lucid when he signed the transfer. He wanted me to have the house because I could make rational decisions about it instead of clinging to the past like you. Then you won't mind if I speak with Michael Sullivan to confirm that. Something flashed in Rebecca's eyes, fear, perhaps, or calculation. Do whatever you want, Abby. The deed is legal and binding. You have until January 15th to move out. She closed her laptop, slipped it into her designer bag, and stood to leave. At the door, she paused. You know, you should be thanking me. This house has been your prison for 3 years. Now you can finally get on with your life. Without waiting for a response, she wheeled her suitcase out to her waiting Uber. I watched from the window as she departed without a backward glance at the home she had apparently been so desperate to own. As soon as Rebecca's car disappeared around the corner, I called Jennifer. She's gone. Let's start packing up the important things, just in case. Jennifer arrived 20 minutes later with empty boxes and determination. We're not letting her win, she assured me, but let's make sure the irreplaceable stuff is safe. We spent Christmas Day carefully packing family photos, heirlooms, and mementos. Mom's handwritten recipe cards and knitting patterns. Dad's collection of vintage fishing lures. Photo albums documenting decades of Mishaw family history. The baby blankets Mom had crocheted for future grandchildren she would never meet. My own childhood artwork that my parents had preserved as though it were priceless masterpieces. As we worked, Jennifer made calls to family members, explaining what we'd discovered in Dad's journal. By evening, Uncle Robert had secured an appointment with Michael Sullivan for the day after Christmas, bypassing the holiday closure through personal connections. He remembers your dad clearly, Uncle Robert reported after speaking with Sullivan. Says there's definitely something he needs to discuss with you regarding the house. For the first time since Rebecca's announcement, I felt a glimmer of hope. Whatever Dad had planned with his longtime lawyer, it almost certainly wasn't what Rebecca had engineered. As I fell asleep that night surrounded by boxes of family treasures, I made a silent promise to my parents. I wouldn't let their wishes be corrupted. Whatever Dad had truly intended for our family home, I would fight to honor it, even if that meant confronting the sister who seemed determined to erase me from the family narrative. The day after Christmas dawned clear and cold. Jennifer drove me to Michael Sullivan's law office in downtown Cedar Grove, a modest brick building where Dad had conducted legal business for decades. Unlike the sleek corporate offices where Rebecca's lawyer worked, Sullivan's practice had the comfortable, lived-in feeling of a place where generations of families had sought guidance through life's major transitions. Sullivan himself was in his 60s, with silver hair and reading glasses that perpetually slid down his nose. He greeted me with genuine warmth, his handshake firm and reassuring. "Addie, I'm so sorry about your father. Jim was not just a client, but a dear friend for many years." He ushered us into his office, where family photos mingled with law books on crowded shelves. "And I'm deeply troubled by what Robert tells me has occurred." I placed Dad's journal on Sullivan's desk, open to the relevant entries. "My sister claims Dad transferred the house to her weeks before he died. She has a deed signed by him and witnessed by a lawyer she brought in, Gregory Wilson." Sullivan's expression darkened as he read the journal entry. "This is not at all what your father and I discussed on December 2nd. He looked up, removing his glasses. "Jim was very clear about his intentions for the family home." "Which were?" I asked, heart pounding. "To leave it to you, Abby. Specifically to you, not as part of the general estate. He wanted to ensure you had security after all you'd sacrificed to care for both him and your mother." Sullivan replaced his glasses and began typing on his computer. "I prepared a will addendum to that effect, which he reviewed but didn't get the chance to sign before." He turned the monitor so Jennifer and I could see the document. "A legal amendment to Dad's will explicitly leaving the family home to me, with provisions for Rebecca to receive other assets of equal value." "Dad never signed this." "No. We scheduled a signing for December 8th, but he called that morning to reschedule. Said he wasn't feeling well. Then I heard from Robert that he'd passed away." Sullivan frowned. "I was surprised when I wasn't contacted about the estate. I assumed another family member had made arrangements." "Rebecca brought in Gregory Wilson right after Dad died," I explained. "She said Dad had changed lawyers." Sullivan's eyebrows shot up. "Jim never terminated our professional relationship. In fact, quite the opposite. We had plans to meet again after the holidays to finalize some charitable giving he wanted to arrange." Hope and anger battled within me. "So what does this mean for the deed transfer? If Rebecca had him sign something when he was heavily medicated, That would constitute fraud and undue influence, Sullivan said firmly, especially if he lacked capacity due to medication. He leaned forward. Abby, do you have access to your father's medical records from that time period? I nodded. I was his medical proxy. I have all his records. And the safe deposit key, Jennifer added. We found it hidden in his desk with a note for Abby. Sullivan's eyes widened. We should check that immediately. Jim mentioned placing important documents there for safekeeping. The next few passed in a whirlwind of activity. We visited the bank, where the safe deposit box contained exactly what Sullivan had suspected, a handwritten letter from Dad to me, dated December 3rd, outlining his wishes for the house to become mine after his death. There was also a USB drive with a video recording of Dad stating these intentions clearly and explaining his reasoning. He knew, I whispered, tears streaming down my face as I watched the video on Sullivan's office computer. He knew Rebecca might try something like that. In the video, Dad looked tired but lucid, his blue eyes so like my own, gazing directly at the camera as if he were speaking to me personally. Abby girl, he said, using his lifelong nickname for me, if you're watching this, then I'm gone. I want to make absolutely clear that the family home should go to you. You've been our anchor these past years, sacrificing your own life to care for your mother and me. This house has been in our family for 30 years, and I know you'll honor its history while creating your own future here. Rebecca will receive other assets of equal value, but the house is yours. If anyone tries to change these arrangements, fight for what's rightfully yours. I've discussed all this with Michael Sullivan, who has the legal documents. The video continued with Dad expressing his love and pride in both his daughters, though he acknowledged the different paths we'd chosen. Rebecca has her career and financial success, you have your compassionate heart and this home. I believe this division honors both your strengths. Sullivan was already drafting legal documents when we returned to his office with the safe deposit box contents. This is clear evidence of your father's true intentions, he said. Combined with his journal entries about being medicated when signing Rebecca's documents, we have strong grounds to contest the deed transfer. What about the notary who witnessed Dad's signature on Rebecca's deed? Jennifer asked. Excellent point, Sullivan said, reaching for his phone. That notary has a legal obligation to verify the signatory was of sound mind and acting voluntarily. Through courthouse connections, Sullivan obtained the notary's contact information by the end of the day. Amanda Peterson had notarized the deed transfer but sounded troubled when Sullivan called her. I remember that appointment, she said, her voice coming through the speakerphone. It was unusual. The client was elderly and seemed not fully alert. When I mentioned my concerns to Mr. Wilson, he assured me Mr. Michaud was just tired and had taken normal medication. I hesitated, but the daughter Rebecca, I think, was very insistent that her father needed to complete this transaction immediately for tax purposes. Sullivan made notes as Amanda spoke. Would you be willing to provide a statement about your observations that day? Yes, Amanda replied without hesitation. I've actually been concerned about that appointment. The gentleman didn't seem to fully understand what he was signing, but I was told it was just a routine property transfer between family members. By the time we left Sullivan's office that evening, we had an emergency motion prepared to contest the deed transfer, along with an application for a temporary restraining order to prevent Rebecca from taking any action regarding the house until the matter was resolved. We'll file first thing tomorrow morning, Sullivan promised. Given the evidence of your father's true intentions and the questions about his capacity when signing Rebecca's documents, I believe we have a strong case. That night, Jennifer stayed with me again as we continued organizing and documenting the house contents. We photographed every room, created inventories of furniture and valuables, and secured irreplaceable items with friends for safekeeping. Rebecca's not going to take this lying down, Jennifer warned as we worked. She's going to fight dirty. Let her try, I said with newfound determination. Dad wanted me to fight for this home, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. Jennifer was right about Rebecca's response. When she was served with legal papers the following day, she called immediately, her voice vibrating with rage. What the hell do you think you're doing? She demanded. The deed is legally binding. You're just wasting money you don't have on lawyers who can't help you. I found Dad's video recording, I replied calmly, and his letter, and the notary remembers him being not fully alert when you had him sign your documents. Rebecca's momentary silence spoke volumes before she recovered. You're delusional. Dad wanted me to have the house because I'm the only one financially responsible enough to handle it. This pathetic attempt to cling to your free housing isn't going to work. This isn't about free housing, Becca. It's about honoring Dad's wishes, his real wishes, not what you manipulated out of him when he was heavily medicated. You'll regret this, she hissed before hanging up. The next day, Rebecca escalated by sending her own lawyer with a formal eviction notice, ignoring the temporary restraining order Sullivan had obtained. When that failed, she tried a different approach, threatening to expose what she called my financial exploitation of our parent. I'll tell everyone how you controlled their bank accounts, she wrote in a text message. How you isolated them from family and friends. How you were helping yourself to their money while playing the devoted daughter. The accusations were so outrageous they would have been laughable if they weren't so painful. I had managed our parents' finances openly, keeping meticulous records that Dad reviewed monthly until his final week. Far from isolating them, I had encouraged visits and outings whenever their health permitted. And the only money I'd ever taken was the modest caregiving stipend Dad had insisted on providing, which barely covered my basic expenses. Sullivan advised me to save all communications from Rebecca as evidence of harassment. This shows desperation on her part, he observed. She knows her case is weak. As we prepared for court, more evidence emerged supporting our position. Dad's doctors provided records showing he was on increased pain medication during his final weeks, including the day he supposedly signed Rebecca's deed. The visiting nurse who had been present that day provided a statement noting that Dad had been confused and disoriented following a pain medication adjustment. Most damning of all, we discovered text messages Rebecca had sent to friends, boasting about her plan to finally get something out of this family situation, and describing how she would flip the house for a nice profit once she had control of it. Jennifer's husband, who worked in digital forensics, helped recover these messages from a tablet Dad had occasionally used that Rebecca had apparently forgotten about. She never cared about the house itself, I realized, reading the messages with a sick feeling in my stomach. She just saw dollar signs, another asset to acquire. That's the difference between you two, Jennifer said gently. You see the home, she sees the house. The distinction was profound and captured perfectly why this fete meant so much to me. This wasn't just about property or money or Ian having a place to live. This was about preserving the heart and soul of our family, the walls that had witnessed our growth, the rooms that held our memories, the foundation upon which generations of Michel family love had been built. As the court date approached, Rebecca made one final attempt to undermine my case. She contacted several distant relatives and family acquaintances, spinning a narrative about my unhealthy attachment to the family home and how I had manipulated Dad in his final days. A few believed her, but most saw through the sudden concern from a daughter who had barely visited her dying parents. Uncle Robert and Aunts Martha and Diane rallied family support on my behalf, sharing their own observations of my years of caregiving and Rebecca's notable absence. When Sullivan called with news of additional evidence, he'd uncovered records showing Rebecca had consulted with real estate developers about the property's potential even before Dad's death. I felt a strange sense of calm replace my anxiety. The truth was emerging piece by piece, revealing Rebecca's calculated plan to seize and profit from our family home while I grieved for our parent. Whatever happened in court, I knew I was fighting for what was right, not just for myself, but for Mom and Dad's memory and legacy. We're as prepared as we can be, Sullivan assured me the night before the hearing. Your father's intentions are clear. The evidence of manipulation is substantial. Now we just need the court to recognize the truth. That night, I sat alone on the porch swing where Dad and I had spent countless evenings watching the sunset during his final summer. The winter air was crisp, the stars bright overhead in the clear January sky. I'm doing what you asked, Dad, I whispered into the darkness. I'm fighting for our home. I just hope it's enough. 6 months after that disastrous Christmas Eve party, I sat in a wood-paneled courtroom, hands clasped tightly in my lap as the judge prepared to announce his decision. The litigation had been exhausting emotionally, physically, and financially, but necessary to honor Dad's true wishes. Rebecca sat at the opposing table with her corporate lawyer, immaculately dressed in a designer suit that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. Throughout the proceedings, she had maintained her position that Dad had willingly transferred the house to her, portraying me as a financially desperate daughter unable to let go. My side had presented substantial evidence to the contrary: Dad's journal entries, the video recording of his true intentions, medical records showing his diminished capacity, the notary's testimony about his confusion, and Rebecca's own text messages revealing her plan to sell the house for profit. Expert witnesses had testified about the effects of Dad's medication on his cognitive abilities. His primary physician had confirmed that on the day Rebecca had him sign the deed, he was taking double his usual dose of pain medication, which would have significantly impaired his judgment and understanding. After careful consideration of all evidence presented, Judge Harris began, his voice steady and authoritative. This court finds that James Michel lacked the capacity to fully understand the deed transfer he signed on December 5 due to his medicated state. Furthermore, there is compelling evidence that Mr. Michel was subject to undue influence during this transaction. My heart pounded so loudly I could barely hear the judge's next. The court therefore rules that the deed transfer to Rebecca Michel is invalid and void. The property remains part of James Michel's estate and shall be distributed according to his documented intentions as evidenced by his video testament and the draft will addendum prepared by his attorney Michael Sullivan. Relief flooded through me with such force that tears sprang to my eyes. Jennifer, sitting beside me, squeezed my hand tightly. Additionally, the judge continued, the court recognizes James Michel's clear intent for his daughter Abigail Michel to inherit the family home. The executor is directed to transfer the property title to Abigail Michel in accordance with James Michel's wishes. Rebecca stood abruptly, her face flushed with anger. This is completely unfair. That house is worth over $300,000. She gets everything while I get nothing. Judge Harris peered at her over his glasses. Miss Michel, the court also directs that you receive other estate assets of equivalent value to ensure equitable distribution, exactly as your father intended. You are not being disinherited, merely required to honor your father's wishes regarding the specific distribution of his assets. Rebecca wasn't listening. She turned to me, her expression contorted with rage. You think you've won? This isn't over. I'll appeal. Miss Michel, the judge interrupted sternly, I strongly advise you to accept this ruling. Given the evidence presented, including your own communications about flipping the property for profit, further litigation would not be advisable. As court officers approached to restore order, Rebecca gathered her things with jerky movements. You can have the damn house, she spat at me. Enjoy being stuck in the past for the rest of your life. With that final bitter comment, she stormed out of the courtroom, her lawyer hurrying behind her. It was the last time we spoke directly. Through lawyers, we later completed the estate distribution, with Rebecca receiving investment accounts and property in Florida that Dad had inherited from his brother years earlier. The victory brought mixed emotions. While relief and vindication were foremost, I also mourned the complete fracturing of my relationship with my only sibling. Despite everything Rebecca had done, she was still my sister, the girl who had taught me to ride a bike, who had helped me with algebra homework, who had shared my childhood home and parents. But as Sullivan gently reminded me, you didn't break this relationship, Abby. You simply refused to be victimized. There's an important difference. In the months that followed, I began the process of healing both the house and myself. The legal battle had depleted much of my savings, but Dad's life insurance policy provided enough to make necessary repairs and updates to the aging home. I started with Mom's garden, which had become overgrown during the litigation. Restoring it became a form of therapy. Each pulled weed and planted flower, a small act of reclaiming peace. I created a memorial corner with a stone bench surrounded by Mom's favorite roses and Dad's preferred shade trees, a quiet spot to sit and feel their presence. Inside, I made gradual changes to honor the past while creating space for my future. I converted Dad's office into a bright art studio where I could work on projects for the community college classes I'd resume teaching. Mom's sewing room became a cozy reading nook filled with her book collection and comfortable cushions. The master bedroom remained untouched for nearly a year, a psychological barrier I wasn't ready to cross until Jennifer gently suggested turning it into a guest room for family visits. "Your parents would want the room filled with love and laughter again," she said. "Not preserved like a museum." She was right, of course. My parents hadn't left me the house to create a shrine to them, but to build my own life within its living walls. As word spread about Rebecca's attempted manipulation, several neighbors and church members shared stories of elder abuse they'd witnessed in their own families. Recognizing a need in our community, I started a monthly support group for family caregivers in our living room. What began with 5 people grew to 15, and 30, eventually requiring a move to the community center to accommodate everyone. The experience of nearly losing my home inspired me to help others protect what mattered to them. I partnered with Sullivan's law firm to organize workshops on end-of-life planning and caregiver rights. My teaching background proved valuable as I developed educational materials to help families navigate these difficult conversations before crisis struck. Throughout this process, I maintained careful boundaries around my privacy regarding Rebecca. When relatives asked about her, I simply said we were on different paths. When her Christmas cards stopped coming, I sent mine anyway for the first few years, though they were never acknowledged. "You can forgive without reconciling," my therapist explained during this period. "Forgiveness is something you do for your own peace. Reconciliation requires mutual effort and change." I worked on finding that forgiveness, not because Rebecca deserved it, but because carrying anger would only hurt me in the long run. I couldn't control her choices or change our past, but I could determine how the experience shaped my future. 3 years after the court ruling, an unexpected letter arrived from Rebecca, not an apology, but a notification that she was moving to London for a significant career opportunity and would no longer contest any estate matter. Enclosed was a small box containing Mom's pearl necklace that had disappeared during the Christmas party chaos. No note accompanied it, but the gesture suggested some softening, however slight. I displayed the pearls on Mom's vanity, which now sat in my bedroom, seeing them as a small victory for our shared history over the division Rebecca had created. Life continued to evolve within the walls of our family home. I eventually met Daniel, a kind-hearted architectural historian who appreciated the character and stories embedded in the house's bones. When our relationship became serious, I worried about bringing someone new into a space so defined by my past. "This house has seen a family grow before," Daniel pointed out when I shared my concerns. "It knows how to welcome new chapters." With his encouragement, I used part of my teaching income and a small business grant to convert the basement into a small pottery studio where I could pursue the artistic passion I'd put on hold during my caregiving years. What began as personal therapy evolved into a modest business creating memorial pieces that incorporated ashes of loved ones or soul from significant locations into custom pottery, tangible keepsakes for others navigating grief. The house that Rebecca had seen only as a financial asset became the foundation for this healing work, allowing me to connect with others experiencing loss while building financial security through meaningful creation. The irony wasn't lost on me in trying to take my home. Rebecca had inadvertently pushed me toward discovering my true calling. 5 years after the court battle, the Michel family Christmas tradition resumed in that house on Maple Street. Different now, with new faces and missing ones, but carrying forward the spirit my parents had created. Aunt Martha still made her famous pecan pie. Uncle Robert still told terrible jokes. Cousins' children now played under the same staircase where Rebecca and I had once built blanket forts. Rebecca didn't attend, though I sent an invitation each year. Perhaps someday that would change, but I'd made peace with the possibility that it might not. Family, I'd learn, wasn't defined solely by DNA but by love, respect, and mutual care, qualities Rebecca had chosen to abandon but that flourished among those who gathered in our family home. As I watched Jennifer's daughters help me hang ornaments on the Christmas tree that 6th December after the confrontation, I reflected on the journey from that terrible night when Rebecca had tried to claim ownership of not just a house, but my place in our family story. Now I'm the owner of that house. Get out, she had declared, wielding her fraudulent deed like a weapon. But ownership isn't just about legal documents and property rights. True ownership comes from love, sacrifice, and stewardship. My parents understood that when they worked for 15 years to buy this home. I understood it during the 3 years I cared for them within these walls. And I understood it now, as I honored their legacy by filling these rooms with new love and purpose. So what did I do when my sister yelled those cruel words at our family Christmas party? I fought not just for a building, but for the truth. For my parents' wishes. For the principle that compassion and care should matter more than profit and power. And in that fight, I discovered strengths I never knew I possessed and built a community I might never have found otherwise. The house stands stronger now, weathered but resilient, much like its owner. And within its embrace, the true meaning of home continues to unfold with each passing season. Have you ever had to fight for something that was rightfully yours? Or experienced a family betrayal that forced you to stand your ground? Share your story in the comments below. If this journey resonated with you, please hit the subscribe button and join our community of survivors and thrivers. Remember to like this video if it touched your heart, and share it with someone who might need to hear that standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's sometimes the most important act of self-respect you can choose. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, family is defined by love, not blood.